Picture this. It is 6 in the morning, the windows are open, and I'm sitting at a little wooden table with a cup of coffee that cost me less than $1. There is fog hanging over the ridge outside my apartment, a rooster somewhere down the hill that has apparently decided nobody in the neighborhood deserves another minute of sleep, and I can smell somebody frying garlic from the house next door. A year ago, if you had shown me this exact scene and told me this was where I would retire, I would have laughed at you. Not because I had anything against the Philippines, I just was not coming here. I had a plan, Malaysia. I had spreadsheets for Malaysia. I had bookmarked hospitals, neighborhoods, visa pages, condo listings, grocery stores, even 3 coffee shops in Penang that I wanted to try. I knew what my monthly budget would be down to the last $100. I had watched so many videos about Kuala Lumpur and Penang that I could recognize streets I had never walked on. The Philippines was supposed to be a side trip, 10 days, that was it. 10 days before I flew on to Malaysia to start the retirement I had spent 2 years planning. My name is Walter Bennett. I am 68 years old. I grew up outside Mesa, Arizona, and I spent 37 years working in commercial heating and air conditioning. Not glamorous work, but good work. I owned a small company for the last 19 of those years. At our biggest, I had 12 guys on payroll, 3 vans, 1 office manager who actually knew what was going on, and me pretending I did. I sold the business when I was 65. Everybody congratulated me. That is the funny part about retirement. People congratulate you as if you just crossed a finish line. Nobody tells you that the day after the finish line, you still have to wake up somewhere. My wife, Diane, died 3 years before I sold the company. Ovarian cancer. Fast at the end, slow before that. We had been married 41 years. I am not going to turn this into a story about grief because that is not what this is. But grief was the reason my house started feeling different. Same furniture, same kitchen, same dent in the hallway wall where one of the boys had thrown a baseball indoors in 1998 and swore it was the dog. But after Diane was gone, the whole place felt like a museum where I was also the security guard. My sons are good men. One is in Colorado, one is in Texas. Both have wives, jobs, children, schedules. They called, they invited me for holidays. They never made me feel unwanted, but there is a big difference between being loved and being part of somebody's daily life. I learned that around month 4 of retirement. At first, I loved not working. I woke up at 7 instead of 5. I played golf twice a week. I fixed things around the house that had been broken for years. I took a road trip to New Mexico. I bought a smoker I absolutely did not need. Then the days got longer. By Tuesday afternoon, I would realize I had not spoken to another person since Sunday except the cashier at Fry's. That bothered me more than I expected. I tried everything people tell retired men to try. Pickleball, volunteering, a men's breakfast at church. I even took a beginner pottery class, which my younger son still finds hilarious because I am a man who once made an apprentice redo an entire duct run because the bends looked sloppy. The pottery class was actually not bad, but none of it changed the basic math. My house payment was gone, but property tax, insurance, utilities, car expenses, Medicare supplements, groceries, and everything else kept climbing. I was not broke. I want to be clear about that. But I could see the direction things were moving. I had about $2,850 a month coming in between Social Security and a small private pension. I also had savings, but I did not want to spend retirement watching the savings number go down every month. I had watched my own father do that. Every unexpected bill scared him. Dental work scared him. A new transmission scared him. He spent his last 5 years saying no to things he could technically afford because he was terrified he might live too long. I did not want that. So I started looking overseas, not because I hated America. I did not. Not because I thought another country was some paradise where everything would be cheap and easy. I was 66 years old, not 16. I just wanted to know whether my money could buy me a little more breathing room somewhere else. I looked at Mexico first, then Costa Rica. Portugal came up. Thailand came up. The Philippines came up too, but for whatever reason, I did not take it seriously at first. Malaysia caught me, Penang especially. The food looked incredible. English was widely used. The private hospitals looked modern. The apartments seemed like good value compared with Arizona. I liked the idea of being in a place that felt organized, but still completely different from home. I went deep on the research. I joined 3 expat Facebook groups. I read old forum threads from men arguing about neighborhoods like their lives depended on it. I watched apartment tours. I watched hospital tours. I watched videos about buying a phone plan, opening a bank account, using Grab, finding imported peanut butter, everything. I know famous last words, but I thought I had done this the responsible way. I even built a retirement budget with categories: rent, $650, food, $350, health insurance, $220, transportation, $120, entertainment, $200, miscellaneous, $300. I had a cushion on top of that. For the first time in a long time, I looked at my monthly income and did not feel like retirement was a countdown clock. The plan was to spend a month in Malaysia before making any decisions, but my flight options opened the door to a little detour. A man named Ray, somebody I had talked to online about expat life, had moved to the Philippines years earlier and kept telling me, "At least come see it before you decide." Ray and I had never met in person. He was one of those internet acquaintances you somehow end up knowing more about than half the people on your street. He lived in Tagaytay. I had barely heard of Tagaytay. I knew Manila. I knew Cebu. I had heard of Boracay. Tagaytay sounded to me like someplace people went for a weekend and bought a magnet. But I found a flight, booked a small hotel for 10 nights, and told Ray I would stop through. I landed in Manila exhausted, sweaty, and already second guessing the whole idea. The airport was busy. The traffic was worse than anything I had seen in the retirement videos. Motorcycles slipped through spaces that did not look wide enough for a shopping cart. There were buses, jeepneys, horns, signs, construction, people everywhere. I remember sitting in the back of the car thinking, "Walter, you have made a mistake." Then we started climbing toward Tagaytay. The air changed first. That is what I remember. It got cooler. Not Arizona winter cool, obviously, but cool enough that when I stepped out near my hotel that evening, I did not feel like the heat was sitting on my chest. There was a breeze. I could smell rain on concrete. The next morning, I met Ray at a little place for coffee in Tapsilog. He took one look at me and laughed. "You look like you expected palm trees and a beach." I told him I expected Malaysia. He said, "Good, then you won't be trying to fall in love with this place." That line stayed with me because I did not fall in love with it right away. The roads irritated me. The noise irritated me. I could not understand why one errand could take half a day. I walked into a grocery store and spent 10 minutes staring at brands I had never seen before because apparently choosing soy sauce becomes a life decision when you are jet lagged. But people kept talking to me, not selling me something, not asking me for money, just talking. The woman at the front desk asked if I had slept well because she remembered I had said I was tired the night before. A security guard at a shopping center started asking about Arizona because his sister lived in Nevada and he was trying to understand whether they were close. A man at a coffee shop heard me ask Ray about places to rent and pulled his chair over because his cousin had an apartment coming available. I am naturally suspicious of instant friendliness. 37 years in business will do that to you. When somebody becomes your best friend in 5 minutes, you start wondering what the invoice looks like, but most of the time there was no invoice. On my fourth day, Ray took me to Mahogany Market. It was crowded and loud. Meat stalls, vegetables, fruit, people moving in every direction, steam coming off bowls of balalo. I had this big bowl in front of me, hot enough to fog my glasses, and outside the weather was gray and cool. A family was eating at the table next to us, grandparents, parents, children, everybody talking over everybody else. One of the little boys kept staring at me. Finally, he asked in perfect English, "Why is your face red?" His mother looked horrified. I started laughing so hard I nearly dropped my spoon. I told him I was from Arizona and had spent 68 years being cooked by the sun. That whole table laughed. Then they asked where I was staying, how long I was visiting, whether I had tried this dish or that dish. Before they left, the grandmother told me I should come back in December because the weather was better. It was nothing. That is the point. It was nothing, and I thought about it all afternoon. Back home, I could go 3 days without anybody asking me a question that was not connected to a transaction. Here, a grandmother I would never see again had opinions about when I should return. By day 6, I started looking at apartments. Not because I had changed my plan. That is what I told myself. Research. I wanted a comparison. The third place I saw was on a quieter road outside the busiest part of Tagaytay. One bedroom, nothing fancy. Tile floors, a small kitchen, old wooden cabinets, a balcony just big enough for a table and two chairs. The building had some age on it. There was a hairline crack in one wall, and the water pressure was not going to win any awards. But from that balcony, early in the morning, you could see the ridge disappear into fog. The rent was 32,000 pesos a month furnished, about $550 at the exchange rate I was using, 32,000 pesos. That number mattered to me. Back in Arizona, between utilities, insurance, taxes, HOA fees, repairs, and all the little costs attached to keeping a three-bedroom house for one person, I was spending more than that before I bought a single grocery. Here, for about $550, I had a furnished place, security, building maintenance, and no lawn calling my name. I still did not sign anything. I flew to Malaysia exactly as planned. And I want to say this carefully because people turn country comparisons into football games. Malaysia impressed me. Penang was beautiful. The food was even better than I expected. Georgetown had more character than my videos had captured. I liked how easy certain things felt. I liked the infrastructure. I liked that I could get around without much trouble. I toured a private hospital and thought, this is exactly why I researched this place. On paper, Malaysia still won. That was the problem. I kept using the phrase on paper. I had coffee in a beautiful modern building and found myself thinking about that noisy breakfast at Mahogany Market. I walked through a polished shopping center and thought about the security guard in Tagaytay asking me whether Arizona was near Nevada. I toured an apartment with a pool, a gym, and a view that looked like something from a brochure, and I thought about the cracked wall in the little Tagaytay place. I started getting annoyed with myself. This was not how I make decisions. I make lists. I compare costs. I look for problems before they become expensive. Feelings are not a retirement strategy, so I forced myself to stay the full month. I ate well, I explored, I met expats, I talked to locals, nothing bad happened, and that is important too. Malaysia did not lose me because Malaysia failed some tests. The Philippines changed my mind because I learned I had been asking the wrong question. I had been asking, well, where can I retire most efficiently? What I should have been asking was, where am I most likely to build a life I actually want to wake up to? There is a difference. At 68, efficiency is not everything. I had spent my entire working life being efficient. Route the trucks, schedule the jobs, cut wasted time, watch labor hours, watch fuel, watch inventory. Then I retired and built myself another spreadsheet. Maybe I did not need another spreadsheet. Maybe I needed neighbors. Maybe I needed a place where I would be mildly inconvenienced sometimes, but also noticed. That word became important to me, noticed. I did not want to be treated like a king. I did not want special attention because I was American. I just did not want to disappear. So after 28 days in Malaysia, I changed my flight. Instead of flying home, I went back to the Philippines. Ray picked me up and did not say a word about being right for almost 15 minutes, which may be the greatest act of self-control I have ever witnessed from another man. The little apartment was still available. I rented it for 3 months, temporary, another test. That was 11 months ago. I still live there. My monthly spending is not some fantasy number. I track it. Most months, I come in between $1,750 and $2,050, depending on whether I travel, eat out more, or have medical expenses. Rent is 32,000 pesos. Electricity can surprise you if you run air conditioning constantly, so I learned quickly to use fans and open windows when the weather allows. Groceries are not automatically cheap if you insist on imported American brands. I stopped insisting. Transportation adds up if you take private rides everywhere. I mix things up. I have made mistakes. I overpaid for a piece of furniture because I was embarrassed to negotiate. I bought enough imported cheddar one month to make my grocery bill look like I still lived in Arizona. I got talked into a day trip that turned into 6 hours in traffic and 1 hour looking at what we had driven there to see. I have also learned that retirement overseas is still retirement. You still get lonely sometimes. You still wake up with a sore knee. You still worry about your children. You still have mornings where you are in a bad mood for no good reason. Moving countries does not turn you into a different human being, but your environment matters. My days have shape now. 3 mornings a week I walk before breakfast. There is a bakery where the woman behind the counter knows I want the same bread unless I point at something else. Ray and I meet for coffee every Thursday. My landlord's brother has decided I need to understand basketball in the Philippines, which mostly means he yells team names at me while I nod. Once a month, I take a bus into Manila for errands and immediately remember why I chose the Ridge. My sons visited in February. That was the part I was most nervous about. I think they expected to find me living some strange old man fantasy they would eventually have to rescue me from. Instead, they found me complaining about the price of coffee, arguing with Ray about the best breakfast place, and reminding them to take their shoes off because I had just cleaned the floor. My older son stood on the balcony the second morning, coffee in his hand, and said, "Dad, you actually seem busy here." I knew what he meant. He meant alive. Not busy like work, connected. There is a temptation when you talk about moving abroad to reduce everything to cost. How much is rent? How much is food? How much is health care? Those numbers matter. At my age, they matter a lot. I would never tell somebody to ignore them, but if I had followed numbers alone, I would be living somewhere else right now, probably happily too. That is the strange part. There was no bad choice between Malaysia and the Philippines for me. There was just a choice I could justify and a choice I could feel. I needed both. The Philippines was rougher around the edges than the retirement plan I had built. It was less predictable. Some days it still tests my patience, but it gave me something I had not known to put in a budget. Familiar faces, spontaneous conversations, the feeling that if I do not show up somewhere for a few days, somebody might actually ask where I have been. That is worth more to me now than a perfect spreadsheet. So here I am, 6 in the morning, windows open, coffee on the table, fog over the ridge. That rooster is still making an argument nobody asked to hear, and somebody next door is frying garlic again. 11 months ago, I would have called this the detour. Now I call it home.